Welcome to Secret Story. I continue the tale of how I got involved in the amazing exploits of Lupe, my uncle's second wife, when I stayed at their guest house. I had visited Izzy and her unsuspecting husband at their guest house the next morning, on the pretext of fixing Izzy's laptop, at her request. Whilst there I had seen Lupe arrive to service one of Izzy's guests. Izzy had told me she would meet me later that afternoon back in my room at Lupe's guest house, and that we would engage in some roleplay scenario. Later that afternoon I was excited to return to my room and see what Izzy had planned. Once outside the room, I knocked on the door, and opened it, stepping inside. "Oh. I'm sorry sir," I heard Izzy's voice, from behind the door. As the door closed behind me, it revealed one hell of a beautiful scene. Izzy stood there dressed in a full, French maid's outfit. It was a classic black and white piece. It looked like Izzy had bought the outfit one size too small to maximize the effect. So too were a little of the straps holding them up, that were presumably attached to a suspender belt underneath that tiny skirt. The black skirt also had a tiny white apron tied across the front. The black fishnet stockings led my eyes down finally to her black high-heeled shoes. "I was just cleaning your room sir, I didn't mean to disturb you," Izzy smiled. The door closed behind me. My God, she looked incredible. For a moment I just stood there taking it all in. Then I remembered I was supposed to be playing along. "Oh yes, no problem," I replied, smiling. Izzy grinned again, perhaps relaxing a little as she could see I was going along with it. "I haven't quite finished, sir. Do you mind?" Izzy asked. "No, of course not," I said, looking around for a moment. I noticed a small stool on the floor, which wasn't usually here. I guessed Izzy had brought it, but for what purpose I couldn't say. There was a feather duster on the desk that she must have brought along to complete her outfit. I also noticed a small box of cleaning products to complete her props. "Where should I sit? I don't want to get in your way," I asked. "Please, sit here sir." Izzy took my arm and guided me to sit on the side of the bed. "I've already made the bed for you." "Oh yes, very nice. Thank you," I said, sitting down. She stood in front of me for a second, looking down on me, smiling. "My name is Izzy, by the way," she said, holding out her hand. I took her hand and kissed it. "Very pleased to meet you, Izzy," I replied. "I'm Jack." "Oh. Jack," she giggled, letting me hold her hand for just a little longer than was necessary. Finally, Izzy turned and picked up her feather duster from the desk. "Well, I should get on," Izzy replied, "but you just relax, sir. Take it easy." Izzy, the maid, began dusting over at the desk, which was directly in front of me, about 5 feet away. "I've not seen you here before, Izzy," I commented. "Oh yes, I often work at a different guest house across town. But when the boss here is busy, I come and clean here too," Izzy replied, looking over her shoulder at me. "Were you out swimming, Jack?" "Ah, yes. Yes, I was," I said. "That robe looks wet," Izzy commented. "Let me take it for the laundry." I nodded, as she walked back over to me. Izzy took the robe, throwing it to the floor by the door. I sat back down on the side of the bed and she returned to her dusting duties at the desk. "You're a very fit young man, Jack," Izzy said, glancing over her shoulder at me again. "How old are you?" "I'm 23, I told her. "Ah, okay. Well, you have a very nice body, if you don't mind me saying so," Izzy continued. "Do you have a girlfriend here?" No. "No, I don't," I replied. Perhaps this was the way into moving the roleplay along, I thought. "Do you have a boyfriend, Izzy?" I asked. "Me? Oh, I've been married a long time," Izzy said, "but I'm sure a handsome young man like you will find a nice girl here in town soon." Izzy then looked under the desk for a moment. "Oh, what's that?" she asked. "The tile here has a nasty stain on it." Izzy took a small cleaning brush from her little box of cleaning products. She also pulled a small thin cushion from the box and threw it on the floor in front of her. Izzy got down on her knees, resting them on the cushion. She then bent over completely, her head and shoulders disappearing underneath the desk. She began scrubbing furiously at the tiled floor underneath the desk. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was sat directly behind her, so had the perfect view. "Oh, it's really stubborn," Izzy said, as she continued scrubbing under the desk. "I would bet that there really wasn't a stain under there, but if there was, I hoped it never, ever came loose." "Oh, sir, it's a very stubborn stain. I think I might be down here for some time, I'm sorry," Izzy the maid explained. "Please sir, you go ahead and do whatever you need to." "I think I might be down here for quite a while." I grinned to myself. I knew exactly what that meant. "Are you okay back there, sir?" Izzy asked. "I'm sorry this is taking so long." "Yes, it's fine, take your time," I told her. "Ah, okay, thank you," she replied. "No, thank you," I thought. It was a wonderful luxury. Izzy certainly knew what men liked and wanted. Izzy continued this show for at least another 5 minutes, never stopping for a rest or complaining. I can see why she had brought the little thin cushion for her knees though. Izzy then shifted her position slightly, and I noticed she was now pushing down on her cleaning brush with both hands, and using her body weight to scrub it back and forth. "Are you okay, sir?" Izzy asked again. "What are you doing back there? Or was I supposed to play it innocent? Which way did I want the roleplay to go? I guess it was up to me. I decided to play innocent for now, and see what other naughty fun Izzy would come up with to tempt me. "Oh, I'm just reading a book," I told her. "The stain isn't coming up, sir. Do you want me to continue?" Izzy asked. She was asking if I was enjoying the show and wanted more, or wanted to move on to other things. "Well, why don't you try a little longer?" I replied. "Sure," she replied. Izzy carried on for me for another good 5 minutes. "It still won't come up, sir. Do you want me to keep trying?" Izzy asked eventually. Again, she was asking if I wanted more of the Izzy show, or try something new. I decided perhaps it was time to move on. "No, don't worry then, thank you anyway," I said. Izzy began to come out from under the desk. As a final thought, I quickly grabbed my Columbia guidebook from the shelf. Izzy stood up, and turned toward me, and smiled. She kicked away the cushion on the floor toward the door. But then she suddenly looked upset, like she was about to cry. "Oh, I'm sorry, are you alright?" I asked, concerned. Had I taken the roleplay too far? Surely not. "No, it's okay, I'm just being silly, I'm so sorry, Jack," Izzy blubbed, wiping away a genuine single tear from her eye. It's just. No, I shouldn't bother you with this. I just met you." "No, it's fine, if you need to talk to someone. You know, weirdly, sometimes someone you don't know is easier to talk to," I said sympathetically, handing her a tissue. "Thank you," Izzy said, taking the tissue and dabbing her eye. "Yes, that's true. It's just I found out today my husband has been cheating on me, you see. It's very upsetting." "Oh my, I'm so sorry to hear that," I replied, genuinely concerned for Izzy. "I mean, I've been a loyal wife many years, so I just don't know how this has happened, you know," Izzy continued. "Oh wow. Give this woman an acting award. She really had me there for a second, but I now understood this to be a quite brilliant performance." Izzy had not been loyal to her husband for a long time, I knew that for a fact. This was Izzy talking, within the confines of our role play. How had she managed that tier? Incredible. "But anyway, I'm so sorry if I embarrassed myself," Izzy said, smiling again, throwing the tissue in the trash. "Oh no, not at all," I replied. "Well, I'm almost finished then, sir," Izzy announced, "just one last task I noticed in the bathroom." I nodded, wondering where she was leading this roleplay next. Izzy stepped into the bathroom for a second, then reappeared to grab the small stool she had brought with her, plus her box of cleaning products, then went back into the bathroom again. Oh. Oh dear. I heard Izzy say a moment later, her high heels click-clacking noisily on the bathroom floor tiles. Are you alright? I asked. Well, would you mind helping me for a minute? I heard Izzy say. I got up from the bed. Izzy stood with her back to the sink, looking at the wall that separated the bathroom from the bedroom. You see, up there, she pointed. At the top of this wall, just below the ceiling, ran a line of glass bricks, 2 bricks high. It ran from one end of the wall to the other. I guess it was to let in additional light from the bedroom into the fairly compact bathroom. The bathroom only had one small window at one end, which was frosted glass, so didn't let much light in. The glass bricks too were not clear either, but frosted in some fashion. It was these bricks that Izzy was pointing up to. I need to clean up there, Izzy explained. I can just about reach it on this stool, you see. But with my high heels, it's a bit unsafe. If I take my shoes off, I can't reach it. I see, I stated. But I couldn't yet see how this would advance our roleplay together. If I stand on the stool, could you just hold me for a minute, so I don't fall? Izzy asked. Now I understood what was about to happen. This could be really fun. Yes, of course. I don't want you to hurt yourself, I replied. She moved the stool in front of me, and stepped up onto it. I placed my hands on her to steady her. Thank you, that's better, Izzy said, smiling down at me. Izzy then leant forward, so she could reach the glass bricks to begin dusting them. As she did so, a huge smile must have spread across my face. I was about to enter heaven. She then went back to cleaning the bricks above me. Oh no, that's not it, Izzy complained. I'm going to fall, Jack. Can you hold me lower? Lower? I asked, innocently, but another grin spreading across my face. Yes, lower. As low as you need to go, she instructed me from above. I need to be safe. I nodded my head that she said nothing and went back to cleaning. I held her like this for some time, enjoying the wonderful sensation. Finally, Izzy stopped cleaning. Well, I finished the dusting, Izzy said. Maybe I should wash these glass bricks though. What do you think? She was asking, was I tired of this game, or did I want more? Well, I definitely wanted more. Yes, they look dirty, I said, looking up at her. Yes they do, can you pass me that cloth? Izzy replied, pointing at her small box of cleaning products she had left next to the sink. I took the duster from Izzy, threw it in the box, and passed her up the cloth. I did this all with my other hand. Izzy turned back to the glass bricks. Oh, they're very dirty, Izzy exclaimed. She began furiously rubbing the glass bricks above me. It was certainly a game I was willing to play all day. I'm sure she did occasionally look down to check what was going on, just not when I was looking up. I was having the time of my life. I decided to push the game further. Are you okay, Jack? Izzy asked, without looking down at me. Was all I could manage, nodding. Hang in there, I'm going as fast as I can, Izzy continued. It's just so dirty. So dirty. Yeah, that's right, I thought. Well, I think that's as clean as it's going to get, Izzy proclaimed. Or do you want me to keep trying, sir? She was asking if I wanted this more interactive show to continue, or move on to something else. I had certainly enjoyed this wonderful part of our roleplay, but I wanted to move on. Maybe leave it for now, I replied. It looks fine now. Okay then, Izzy said. Well, thank you for keeping me safe up here, Jack. Izzy then held my other hand as she carefully stepped down from the stool, back onto the tiled floor. Oh, my goodness! Izzy exclaimed, motionless for a moment. Yeah, sorry about that, I replied, trying to stifle a grin. Oh dear, I'm so sorry to have had that effect on you, Jack, Izzy continued. I didn't mean to, of course. I hope you believe that. Yes, of course, I replied, it's just. Ah yes. Well, I can't leave you like that, can I? Izzy said, it's just, well, no one must find out if, if I helped you out. You understand? Oh. Izzy, please, Izzy giggled. Eventually though, I felt it was time to step up the roleplay once again. Where's your husband right now? I whispered in her ear. I don't know, with her. I asked. Of course, in reality, Izzy's husband had gone off to his job, and it was his wife who was fooling around behind his back. But in our roleplay, Izzy the maid's husband had been cheating on her, and I wanted to remind her of it. Maybe, Izzy replied, maybe. I wondered what her husband Emiliano would think if he knew what his wife was up to right now. Hey, what are you doing? Izzy giggled. Hey, Izzy scolded me again, but with a smile, I decided it was time to push toward what I felt our roleplay was headed for. I did as I was told, and clambered. I wondered whether Lupe had returned yet, whether she was outside and heard her friend Izzy's. But she was probably still at Izzy's guest house Casa Rosita across town, where I had seen her earlier. I was very fond of Lupe, my uncle's wife, but I did also very much enjoy thinking about her being all over town. I wondered if I would come to feel similarly fond of Izzy. And Izzy obviously liked me just as Lupe did. Yes, I'm sure I was going to develop similar feelings about Izzy that I had for Lupe. That I continued giving her what she needed, what she had been missing. She was loving it, and so was I. I did as the lady requested. She looked up at me with a very self-satisfied grin. I was pleased I had made her happy too. Good boy, she told me. Okay, you take a rest, I'm gonna get cleaned up. I moved to sit next to her. Alright, I'm gonna take a nice long hot shower. You take a quick nap, and think nice thoughts, Izzy continued. Okay, I replied, closing my eyes. What a wonderful roleplay it had been. I wondered what new outfit Izzy was going to wear later for me. I was happy that Izzy had clearly enjoyed herself too. I drifted off for a while. It could have been for 5 minutes, or maybe 20, I couldn't tell. I awoke with a startle, hearing Izzy in the bathroom. You ready for me, babe? Izzy called out through the bathroom door. I'll be just a minute. I rubbed my face awake, and then got under the covers in the bed. Whilst waiting, I decided I would take the next week off from traveling around getting my photo assignments. I could spend the week enjoying the attentions of Lupe here at Casa Madre, and I was sure Izzy would be up for more fun across town at Casa Rosita. I began to fantasize about all the things I could get up to next week with Lupe and Izzy. Then, the bathroom door began to open. Come on then, I heard Izzy said, tell me what you want. To be continued. I continue the tale of how I got involved in the amazing exploits of Lupe, my uncle's second wife, when I stayed at their guest house. My afternoon with the stunning Izzy had been incredible. She had dressed up as a chambermaid, and we had played out a fun scenario in my room. A total of 3 times that afternoon. It had been an incredible experience. I couldn't believe my luck. Since being in Colombia for less than a month, Izzy was, like Lupe, an incredible woman. She had told me she enjoyed servicing the older clientele at her guest house, Casa Rosita, on the other side of town, as well as Lupe's guests here at Casa Madre. But they were all older men, in their 50s or 60s. Izzy said she had a thing for younger men, but rarely got to indulge in acting out that fantasy. I told her that she and Lupe were just like peas in a pod, which she giggled at. But then sadly it was time for her to get back to Casa Rosita before her husband returned home. The next week was so much fun. I spied on Izzy servicing Mr. Cohen one afternoon. Another day Izzy returned to my room and I spent a few wonderful hours with her again. Later in the week, I had to travel down the Pacific coast of this rugged coastline, and so spent a couple of nights away from the Casa Madre guest house. I had to catch up on the reason I was in Colombia in the first place. With all my exploits with Lupe, and now Izzy too, I had rather neglected my photography assignment. My boss back in London was fairly relaxed about it, particularly as my salary and expenses weren't that big. But I didn't want to let him down. This assignment had originally been scheduled for 2 months. And I was already coming to the end of the first month. I was desperate to extend the length of the assignment, as it would mean spending more time in with my 2 favorite MILFs. So I worked hard that week, spending long hours trying to catch up on my missed work. The only way to extend my time here was to impress my boss with what I could achieve. I had also decided to exaggerate to my boss the difficulty of getting around this coastline, in the hope my request to spend more time here to complete the project would be looked upon sympathetically. After I returned from my short trip away, I emailed my boss with my request and a lengthy explanation of the problems and issues I was facing in obtaining my photographs and samples of all the local flora and fauna they were interested in. I hoped for a speedy reply granting my request, but we would have to wait and see. In the evening after returning to my uncle's guesthouse, Casa Madre, I had a meal with him and Lupe. We chatted about my assignment, and that I had requested to extend my stay here. I couldn't help but notice Lupe's smile at this. Uncle Jerry seemed happy too, probably because it meant more income to him from his struggling guesthouse business. Certainly, Uncle Jerry wouldn't have been so happy to know why his wife Lupe had been smiling at the possibility of me staying here longer, that she was in fact looking forward to perhaps many more months of his nephew. That evening I sat out on the veranda walkway outside my room. There was a nice cool breeze out here, after a sweltering afternoon. It wasn't long however before I heard a familiar sound coming from the end of the guesthouse building, where my uncle and Lupe lived. It was Lupe. It was a sound I had heard quite a few times whilst sitting out here, and of course much more up close and personal in my room during my own sessions with the lovely Lupe. She certainly did, I'll give her that. The next morning, I had planned to sleep in late. But around 8 a.m. there was a knock at the door. It was Lupe. She stayed out on the veranda, as Uncle Jerry had not left for work yet, and was still loading up his truck in the courtyard below. She wore little cut-off jean shorts and a tight white t-shirt. "Hey sleepyhead," Lupe grinned, "you missed breakfast with us." I sometimes had breakfast with my uncle and Lupe before heading out to work on my assignment, but had not planned on it today. I grinned, rubbing my eyes. "You got any plans for this afternoon?" Lupe asked, lowering her voice, presumably to ensure her husband downstairs did not hear. "No, not really," I replied, intrigued. "Okay, good," Lupe continued, smiling, "well, it might very much be in your interest to be down at Izzy's guesthouse later, maybe around 1 p.m. "Oh really?" I asked, grinning, "So, what's going on?" Lupe simply giggled, turned, and began walking back down the first-floor veranda toward the staircase that led down to the courtyard below. "Come on Lupe, give me a clue here," I pleaded. "I have to do my chores now," Lupe said, flashing a grin over her shoulder at me. I watched her as she went down the stairs and over to Uncle Jerry at his truck, where they chatted for a while. My uncle then gave me a wave as he got into his truck and drove off to his workshop for the day. Lupe disappeared back into the end of the guesthouse building that was her home with my uncle. I wondered what it was exactly that Izzy had planned for me this afternoon. When she had serviced before, Izzy had always come here to my room at Casa Madre. I had been to Izzy's guesthouse, Casa Rosita, before. I went back to sleep for a couple of hours. Then awoke, showered and dressed, and got some lunch from one of the street vendors around the corner. I looked around Casa Madre for Lupe, but she didn't seem to be around. At 12:30 p.m. I borrowed my uncle's scooter and rode over to Casa Rosita guesthouse on the other side of town, a journey of fewer than 10 minutes. I was about to enter the reception area at the front of the building to meet Izzy when I noticed a man behind the counter sorting through some papers. It was Emiliano, Izzy's husband, who I had met on my only previous visit here. I decided it didn't have a reason to be here, at least not one I could explain to Izzy's husband. Before he could see me, I ducked through the gate to the right of the reception. That led into the guesthouse courtyard. The courtyard was fairly private and secluded from the road, and luckily the blinds on the window on the side of the reception office were drawn closed, so I could not be seen here by Emiliano either. But where was Izzy? I didn't know where to find her, and I hadn't expected her husband to be here. Why had Izzy asked me to visit if she knew he would be here? My mind was spinning. But then suddenly I heard something above me. "Hey, Jack." "Up here," a hushed voice announced. I looked up to see Izzy standing 2 floors directly above me. She leaned over the balustrade and waved, smiling, and pointed to the staircase to the right. I bounded up the steps and out onto the second-floor veranda walkway. Izzy grabbed my arm and pulled me into a vacant guest room, then swirled around to close the door behind us. She peered through the window back out into the courtyard for a moment, then turned and kissed me. "It's okay, I don't think he saw you," Izzy said, smiling. "He's down in reception," I told her. "Why did you ask me to come if your husband is here?" "He's not supposed to be," Izzy explained. "We just got back from a meeting at the bank, applying for a loan to renovate at least some of our guest rooms, but it overran. But he's late for his job, so he should be leaving soon." "Ah, okay, so you're gonna do up the rooms here?" I asked. "Some of them, yeah. Similar to what Lupe and Jerry have done at Casa Madre," she continued. "There's no point doing them all up, our occupancy rate here is pretty low. But it would be nice to offer some nicer rooms, 'cause it means charging higher prices." "I see, makes sense I guess," I replied, putting my hands around her waist. "So what I am doing down this way?" "You usually come to see me at Casa Madre." Izzy smiled and kissed me again. "Well, what I've got planned we can't do there, honey," she explained. "I need your eyes, and maybe your help if something goes wrong." "What? So, like, do we need a safe word or something?" I asked half-jokingly, intrigued. Yes. Yes, maybe we do." Izzy replied, rather earnestly, "How about pineapple?" "Pineapple?" I repeated, surprised my joke was taken seriously. What was Izzy getting me into? "Yes, if you hear me say pineapple, you'll come to my aid?" Izzy asked. "You'll be my safety net?" "Okay, sure, I promise," I told her, and I meant it too. I liked Izzy a lot and certainly didn't want anything bad to happen to her. "Good boy," Izzy smiled. "But what is it exactly that you have planned, Izzy?" I asked. She grinned, looked back out through the window into the courtyard for a moment, checking for any sign of her husband, and then began to tell me the tale of what had occurred in the last few days, and what she had planned. Izzy had discovered through a girlfriend of hers that there was a wedding taking place in the town this coming Saturday. The young bride was a local girl, and the groom was originally from Medellin. The groom was currently studying at a university in the United States. Once his studies were complete, he would return to Colombia, and he and his new wife would move to Bogotá. Apparently, 5 of the groom's American friends from university were traveling down here for the wedding. Izzy had, through her girlfriend, arranged to give them a reasonable discount on rooms for their visit. They had all arrived on the same flight into Buenaventura together, traveled down here by boat, and checked in here yesterday afternoon. Izzy had met them all at the reception office downstairs. She said they were all between 18 and 21 years old. They were all slim, athletic types, as they were all involved in their university soccer teams. Izzy told me they were all fairly handsome too, and one of them had even attempted to briefly flirt with her until her husband arrived in the office to help the boys with their luggage. Now they were apparently all down in room 28, at the back end of the guesthouse building, furthest from the street noise. Izzy took me to the window and pointed toward it. It was up in here on the second floor but on the other side of the courtyard below. "You see it?" Izzy asked. I nodded. To the left of room 28, there was the stairwell. "You see the stairs to the left? There is a storage room there, you see it?" Izzy asked. "Yes," I replied. "You go there now and wait for me. You'll be able to see into the room, just like when you spied on me before at Lupe's place," Izzy explained. "It might be a little while, I'll have to wait for my husband to leave before the show can begin." Before I could say anything, Izzy cracked open the door, peered out down into the courtyard again, and forced me out onto the veranda. "Okay, go now, honey," Izzy instructed, and then turned and headed down the stairs. I quickly moved over the veranda crosswalk to the other side of the building, and quietly as I could, made my way down toward room 28. I looked over my shoulder several times, checking to make sure Izzy's husband didn't suddenly pop out of the reception office downstairs and spot me. I made it to the stairwell just before room 28. I opened the green door marked storage, entered, and closed the door firmly, but quietly, behind me. I turned on the light. The storage room was pretty small. There were some shelves with cleaning products, and a wet and dry vacuum cleaner in the corner. There was also a small short stool. I wondered how I might get to spy on what was going on in room 28. Izzy had said that I could, in the same way I had spied on her with Mr. Dubois at Lupe and Uncle Jerry's Casa Madre guest house. I then immediately saw what she meant. There were two old, small ventilation fans next to each other at the center of the wall that the storage room shared with room 28, about 3/4 of the way up the wall. Initially, I was unsure of their purpose, but soon realized this storage room used to have been the separate bathroom to room 28. You could see some old pipework in here of where a sink had been. Presumably, there had been a previous renovation years ago to move the bathroom into the guest room itself. But now these old ventilation fans were obsolete and disconnected. But stepping closer, I could see just a small glimpse into the guest room beyond. I quickly turned off the light here in the storage room. I didn't want the possibility of being seen in here from the guest room. Someone long ago had placed some thick, black card in the ventilation fans, presumably to give the illusion of it being blocked off. It was all pretty shoddy, but then this whole guesthouse building had a rather run-down look to it. As quietly as I could I removed the card, and between the motionless fan blades, I now had a pretty clear view into the guest room beyond. The room was really quite large and spacious. There were two double beds, with the headboards pressed up against the wall opposite, and a long rectangular-shaped mirror on the wall above the headboards. Fixed to the wall on the left was a small TV. To the right was a red sofa, the door into the bathroom, and then far off to the right was the door back out onto the veranda outside. The door was an all-glass type, with two floor-to-ceiling glass windows on either side. The windows and door had white net curtains pulled across them, to stop anyone outside from seeing in. There were also thick, dark red curtains, currently hung to the side, but you could pull them across for even more privacy. The walls were all painted a light blue. The room had definitely seen better days, but at least there was lots of space. The bedspreads and pillows were a clean, brilliant white, however. It made me think that even though Izzy's guesthouse wasn't the best looking, she was making the best of it, as much as she could. I also now noticed the air conditioning unit was mounted just above these obsolete fans that I was spying through, inside the room. There was some pipework coming through the wall into the storage room, presumably taking the hot air away. I could hear the machine was running, but luckily it was very quiet, so I could still hear everything going on in the guest room. There was only one individual in the room, a young white guy sitting on the sofa, quietly watching a baseball game on the TV. He wore shorts and a t-shirt. I figured he was maybe 20 years old. Izzy had said all the American guys were down here in this room. I wondered what had happened to the others. There wasn't much to see right now, so I sat down on the small stool, alone in the dark with my thoughts. Izzy had said she might be a while. Izzy had said she was waiting for her husband to leave before the show could begin. I wondered exactly what that meant. A few minutes later there was a commotion coming from the guest room, so I stood back up to watch through the ventilation fan. The door to the veranda outside was open and some other guys were entering the guest room. They had a couple of plastic bags of shopping, full of cans of beer and snacks. I guess that had been out to the local store for a supply run. As Izzy had mentioned, they were all pretty young guys, with fairly athletic-looking bodies. The last guy in closed the door to the veranda. There were now 6 guys in total. There were 3 white guys, 2 black guys, and a Latino. As they chatted and joked with each other, I worked out the Latino guy's name was Santiago, but they usually called him Santi. He was the one getting married tomorrow. Of the white guys, the first was called Jeff, a tall blonde. Then there was Paul, a shorter, stocky guy with short-cropped brown hair. The last white guy was Ronnie, a bigger-built kid with longer brown hair. The first of the black guys was Marcus, probably the most athletic and muscular-looking of all of them, with distinctive tattoos on his forearms. Finally, there was Andre, who looked the youngest. With a cute look to him. They all seemed to know each other pretty well, and appeared to be fairly likable. They were apparently planning to chill in the room for the afternoon, to watch the baseball team they all supported on the TV. Then later they were going to take Santi out to hit the town for drinking, and maybe meet some local girls, as it was Santi's last night of freedom before getting married. As they chatted, I returned to the storage room door, and cracked it open a little, and looked down into the courtyard. A minute or so later, over the front wall of the courtyard in the street, appeared Izzy and her husband Emiliano. She kissed him goodbye as he got in his car to drive off to work. Izzy had previously told me he worked long shifts at a small factory in a town to the south. He usually finished work around midnight, and so didn't return home until 2 a.m. As he drove off, Izzy waved, then came through the gate and back into the courtyard. She still wore her smart skirt and blouse, with her hair tied up. She had obviously made herself up to look businesslike for her meeting at the bank this morning. A moment later she disappeared from my view. What kind of show was about to happen? Was Izzy going to drag the groom off to another room? Before I closed the door, I suddenly noticed in the corner of the storage room something I had not spotted before. There was a large wooden baseball bat. I surmised Izzy had left it there for me, just in case I had to perform as her safety net. Hopefully, it would not be needed. I closed the door, and sat back on the stool in the dark again, and waited. I waited for some time. I checked my watch, it was almost 2 p.m. But then finally I heard a knock at the door to the guest room. I stood up to look through the ventilation fans again, into the room. Before any of the guys could get up, the door opened. There, standing in the door frame, stood Izzy, in full silhouette due to the afternoon sun directly behind her. She stepped inside as the door swung shut. Izzy wore a long pink bathrobe that hung down to her ankles, completely covering whatever she was wearing underneath. All I could see were her black high-heeled shoes. She had reapplied her makeup, and let down her hair. "Hello boys," Izzy grinned, "how's it going?" The guys all looked at each other, not sure as to what was happening. Fine Mrs. Diaz," Santi, the groom-to-be, finally piped up. Good to hear. You all finding your rooms comfortable?" She continued. "Yes, ma'am," Jeff replied nervously. "Good. So, you guys going out on the town later tonight, huh?" Izzy asked. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said, nudging Santi on the arm, taking this guy out for his last night of freedom. All eyes were on Izzy, transfixed. "I see. I'm going to assume that's going to involve lots of naughtiness and bad behavior the bride might not approve of." Izzy grinned, running her hand through her long blonde hair. A few chuckles from the guys were forthcoming, but they all still continued to stare at Izzy's every move. "Well, before you do, I thought I'd put on a little show for you right here." Izzy smirked. "Oh!" Jeff exclaimed. All the guys stared, dumbfounded, open-mouthed at this incredible MILF in her mid-30s now. "Remind me, which one of you is the groom?" Izzy purred. Santi nodded in acknowledgement. "That's right, we haven't actually met before, have we?" Izzy asked, standing right in front of him, looking down. Santi shook his head. You see, I met all your friends yesterday when they checked in, Izzy continued, and they were all getting a real good look down my. Weren't you boys? They all nodded. At least you were until my husband arrived, and spoiled all your fun, Izzy said. They all shook their heads. Well, I think the groom deserves a special treat, don't you? Izzy said. All the other guys sat around were transfixed still, some slack-jawed and dumbfounded, others grinning. I had wondered if this was going to be an interactive show or not. It seemed Izzy was going to allow it. But a moment later both Marcus and Jeff, sitting on the sofa, on either side of Santi. Izzy grinned, as Paul, Ronnie, and finally Andre stood up from sitting on the side of the bed and moved to stand in front of her. I wanted to get a clearer view, and quietly managed to pull out a few of the fan blades from the ventilation fans. Now I could see the show a whole lot better. Izzy allowed this for a minute or so, grinning. Boys, boys, boys. She exclaimed, so many wandering hands. For just a moment I thought she was bringing the show to an end already. I had to remember the safe word, pineapple. If I heard that, it meant she didn't feel safe anymore, and I would have to intervene. What would my husband think if he saw you treating his wife this way? Izzy said, giggling. It was quite apparent Izzy was very much enjoying the attentions of 6 horny, young, fit men. Wait, he's not here, is he? Andre said nervously, looking toward the door. Izzy said nothing for a moment. All the guys looking at each other nervously. No, of course not, he's miles away at work, Izzy said finally, giggling, and will be for quite some time. The guys relaxed again, with a few nervous laughs. All right guys, calm down, I know you're all horny, but I have a reputation in this town to maintain, you know. Izzy said calmly, but firmly, but if you're all good boys, and do something for me, then I'll do something for you. Okay, now, first of all, what's your name? Izzy asked, looking at Santi behind her. Santi, he replied. Okay, Santi. You have to promise me you're not going to talk about this with anyone else in this town, you understand? Izzy said very firmly, I'm sure there are people attending your wedding who know me. This town isn't that big. Santi nodded, smiling. Santi. You promise me? Izzy chided him, see, Mrs. Diaz, I promise. I won't tell a soul, Santi replied, looking Izzy in the eye now. Okay then, Izzy said, calm again, looking up to the other guys all around her, and you boys, you promise me the same? I hope it goes without saying that you also don't speak a word about this to my husband. All the guys nodded, mumbling, yes, Mrs. Diaz. Well, okay then, now we have an understanding. I just need one more thing from you, before we can continue, Izzy said. Wait, what? Paul said. Come on, don't be shy. I'll make it all worth it, Izzy teased. Are we still shy? Izzy asked him. Alright, I'll come back to you in a minute. Andre nodded, rather sheepishly. Alright, good, this is going to be fun, Izzy smiled. Let's move over here a little. Izzy stepped over to stand right in front of the ventilation fan in the wall through which I was spying on her. She grinned at me briefly, the only one in the room who knew I was there. Come on, then guys, make a circle here around me, Izzy instructed. The guys moved to stand around her. No wait, I mean a semicircle, Izzy said, moving Andre and Jeff, as they were blocking my view from the vent. I need the air to keep me cool. Izzy had realized if they stood in a circle around her, I would be blocked from a good view of proceedings by whoever stood in front of the ventilation fan. Luckily, with the air conditioning unit being directly above it, it was easy for her to come up with an excuse to keep that area clear. Izzy looked across at the vent again for a second, grinning, and flicking her hair. Izzy asked for a pillow from the bed and put it under her knees. She then asked Andre to fetch her robe from over by the door. He did so and handed it to her. Izzy pulled out something from the pocket. It was a pink collar, which she put on around her neck, fastening it at the back. When she turned toward me hiding behind the vent, I saw on the front of the collar it read in silver lettering with diamante crystal inserts. Izzy grinned up at Santi. Oh. Santi moaned. Only Andre still looked a little uncomfortable, shifting his stance, still wearing his shorts. I wondered why. Perhaps Andre was gay and hadn't told his friends, and this unexpected situation was making him anxious. Or maybe it was just that he was very inexperienced. He did seem to be the youngest of the group. I figured we would all find out soon enough. What's your name again, honey? Izzy asked. Marcus, he replied. Hello Marcus, Izzy giggled. They were all smiling, and apart from Andre. Yeah, go girl, Marcus said. Finally, Izzy came up for air again and began to turn to her left again. Now, who's this? Izzy asked. I'm Paul, ma'am, he replied. Hello Paul, Izzy said. Again, more chuckles from the guys. A minute or so later, this time to face Ronnie. And who do we have here? Izzy asked. Ronnie, Mrs. Diaz, he replied, looking down on her. Pleased to meet you, Ronnie, Izzy said. She looked up at him, smiling. Okay Mr. Shy One, what's your name? Izzy asked them. Andre, ma'am, he mumbled. Well, okay Andre, don't be shy, or we can't have any fun together, can we? Izzy said, sympathetically, smiling up at him still. Oh my God, Andre. Izzy grinned looking up at him. Boy. Why you been hiding that thing away? Marcus joked. I got the feeling perhaps Andre, and maybe that's why he had been so shy at first. But he was now starting to finally relax a little. That's it, go, Andre. Get some, Marcus called out. A few more moments of this. And what's your name, handsome? She asked. It's Jeff, he replied. Hi Jeff, Izzy said, now I've met all of you. All the guys laughed, including Andre, who was now going along with the vibe in the room. What exactly does your husband think you're doing right now, Mrs. Diaz? Ronnie asked. He thinks I'm cleaning the guest rooms. Izzy grinned as she came up for air, which isn't exactly a lie, is it? I mean, technically, and they are in a guest room. He can't really complain. Can he? Suddenly, outside the storage room, I heard muffled footsteps out on the veranda. A moment later there was a knock at the door of the boys' guest room. Silence fell in the room, as all the guys looked to the door, motionless, listening. Then another knock on the door. Go away, we're busy in here, Marcus shouted. Certainly, the boys did not want to be disturbed right now. But I saw Izzy smile. Then the door opened, and a figure appeared in the doorway. Again, the person was in silhouette, due to the angle of the afternoon sun behind them. The guys squinted trying to make out how it was. As the person stepped into the room, I realized who it was. The door swung shut behind them, cutting out the blinding sun, to reveal Lupe standing there wearing a short black jacket. Hey Izzy, you look busy, Lupe said, need some help? Well, I think I'm doing all right here, Izzy replied, grinning, but sure, come on in, Lupe. Join the party. Boys, this is Mrs. Lopez, Izzy said with a grin. Hi boys, Lupe grinned knowingly. Hi Mrs. Lopez, Marcus said, returning her grin. All the other guys repeated Marcus' greeting. Hi. I hope you boys don't mind me joining in on all the fun, Lupe purred. You're most welcome, Mrs. Lopez, Jeff said, smiling at her, as she strutted towards the group. I wasn't sure why Izzy had introduced Lupe as Mrs. Lopez. My uncle's last name was not Lopez. Perhaps Lopez was Lupe's last name before she got married, and had kept it. I reminded myself to ask her about it later. From the looks on the guys' faces, I could tell they couldn't believe their luck. Not one, but two married. Lupe stepped into the semicircle. Oh, Lupe grinned, just don't tell my husband. That's exactly what Mrs. Diaz said, joked Paul. All the guys laughed, as did Lupe and Izzy. Well, it's true. Izzy and I have common interests, I guess. Well, I think it's time to get the party started. Jeff grabbed Lupe's jacket from the floor near the door, and returned to his place in the semicircle, passing it to her. Lupe grabbed something from the pocket and then threw her jacket aside. In her hand was a pink collar similar to the one Izzy wore. She put it around her neck, fastening it at the back. As she turned toward me, I could see the silver-colored letters on the front, again decorated with diamante crystals. Lupe then winked, right at me, or at least in my direction, letting me know she knew I was there watching. "Oh, wow," Ronnie exclaimed. Lupe was face to face with Andre now. "Oh, my God," Lupe beamed, "what's your name?" "Andre," he replied, with a little more confidence now. "Well, come here, Andre," Lupe smiled. For the next 30 minutes or so, Lupe asked each guy their name before him, just as Izzy had done. "You like, boys?" Lupe asked with a grin. There was a barrage of comments from the boys, all very positive. "Well, I think now you should put some work into it, don't you, Izzy?" Lupe said, turning back toward her friend. Izzy nodded. The boys then gave her, and Ronnie, a round of applause, cheering. "Thank you, Mrs. Lopez," Ronnie sighed. "You're welcome, Ronnie. Now take a seat over there," Lupe said, pointing to the red sofa. "You take a rest, enjoy the show, and when you're ready, just back in." Ronnie stepped out of the semicircle, and he went to sit on the sofa as instructed. Paul joined Ronnie on the sofa, and watched the show, much as I did, with total fascination. The boys continued to rotate around every few minutes. Now that there were only 4 of them, Izzy and Lupe handled 2 boys each. Lupe looked up at Santi and Marcus. "You know, boys, there's something I've always wanted to do, will you help me?" she asked, a cheeky grin on her face. Marcus and Santi looked at each other for a moment, a little unsure of what she was asking them to do. "I don't think I'm gonna be able to do that with Andre here," Izzy said, glancing back at Lupe's antics. "What would your husband say if he could see you now, Mrs. Lopez?" Marcus asked, smiling down at Lupe. Lupe let the continue for a minute or so more, before releasing the 2 guys. "Thank you, boys," Lupe said, grinning. Lupe and Izzy giggled. "Well, I think it's time to change up a gear now, don't you, Izzy?" Lupe said. "Yeah, for sure," Izzy replied. Andre and Jeff pulled Izzy up onto her feet. Marcus and Santi also pulled Lupe to her feet. Both Ronnie and Paul got up from the sofa. I was jerking myself furiously. Man, this show was about to really heat up. TOB continued, copyright 2024, all rights reserved. No part of this story can be reproduced in any form or by any electronic or mechanical means without written permission from the author. All characters are fictitious, and any similarity to actual people, living or dead, events, or locales is entirely coincidental unless otherwise stated. Dear friends, thank you very much for watching. Leave comments, put likes, share with friends and subscribe to the channel.